Hello and namaste. Welcome to the Almost Daily Zencast. I am your host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, and I humbly welcome you to my slightly irregular podcast. It's October 17th, 2017. Thank you for tuning in. Let's get started. Well, there's been a lot going on in the world since the last time I took the opportunity to make a podcast. And after trying to wrap my brain around a lot of different potential topics, in the last 48 hours, it's become really clear to me that I think the most appropriate subject to talk about is this powerful and really challenging MeToo movement. This hashtag, for anyone out there listening that hasn't come across it yet, for whatever reason, no judgments, if you don't know about it yet, it's a reaction that seems to be growing organically, although I'm sure, and I mean no disrespect to anybody associated with the hashtag, I'm sure that the conspiracy theorists will spin some conspiracy theory about how George Soros or somebody like him is paying for everyone to be a hashtag MeToo participant. Setting all of that aside, I think it's important for us to recognize and celebrate the fact that a wave of revelation and healing is literally surging through our postmodern society, and we're witnessing it in real time. This wave of disclosure and healing is in response, of course, to the most recent celebrity sex scandal. And not to bring the focus there, because that individual and the people he impacted are getting enough airtime in all the media, and there's plenty of scrutiny going, falling towards those people and a lot of attention on that. I don't want to bring it to that. The scandal itself is nothing new, right? We've seen this over and over and over again. And doubtlessly, there's many, many, many stories hiding beneath the surface that have not come to light because they're too hard to share, or the persons involved are not ready to disclose, or are under the influence of their abuser to not disclose. But I think that as we cope with this, in the wake of the sort of similar revelations about our president, and I'm sure I'll go on a rant about this in a future Trumptopia episode, but it's interesting to see the difference. The same sort of information came out about Donald Trump, and while it evoked its own response, both in support of him and in dismissal of his accusers and in support of his accusers, etc. This is a sort of higher order of activity going on. And perhaps it required this many revelations or this many scandals. This response, though, I think can be called or categorized as new. Surely, people have talked about their trauma and their abuse, men and women, in different ways in the past, but I think that we live on this cutting edge. We literally live in the future, folks. And, like a sci-fi version of a future we imagined as kids. And with all this sci-fi level technology at our disposal, we have the opportunity to not just comment, but rather truly facilitate a transformative healing right now. And I think that this is worth investigating. And so, today's episode, I want to open with a thought that I've often, posited and shared in regards to other issues. I think it's applicable here, and I understand that this is a sensitive subject. I also understand that it's a far-reaching, deep subject that has impacted more people than most of us care to realize. And so it is with great delicacy and compassion and kindness that I say the following, because it just sort of adds to the delicacy and the sort of touchiness of this. But one of the mechanisms that has perpetuated this issue for so long in our society is that we, as individuals, often blame society for negative impacts on us as individuals, but we are society. And that's a sort of inseparable web that's woven between us. Given all of that, I'd like to posit that perhaps this moment in history that we are living through right now, as painful as it is, as alarming and as uncomfortable and as disgusting and as shameful and as painful and traumatizing as it is, this moment might very well be an opportunity for us as individuals and as a society and as a species to see ourselves more clearly. I do not say this lightly or without compassion for all of us, but we did not arrive in this moment in history by accident. We did this to ourselves. Now, it is easy to dismiss that statement, especially when dealing with pain, personalized pain, and sexualized pain. It's easy to dismiss. We don't want to take responsibility. It's easy to point fingers, especially when one has been, and I'm not trying to dismiss any experience or any point of view. What I'm trying to do is elevate the discussion. I'm proposing that we as a society, we as two communities, because while we are one species, we are a community of, and I'm not trying to be binary or enforce that sort of quote-unquote normalcy. I'm just saying at the biological level, at a fundamentally organic level, we are two communities. That is one fundamental way that we can draw some lines. And while those lines are sometimes useful, it is sometimes even more useful to transcend those lines. And I don't mean in some way that, in any other way than spiritual and in terms of healing. One of the things that makes this difficult to talk about, for, let's admit, right now, intimacy, sexuality, the boundaries therein, the moral code the moral codes, plural, because we banty about several different kinds, that we try to enforce in our societies, these all things are, however intended to be helpful, quite divisive, because they are anchored in the following: the illusion of our individuation, the phenomena of appearing to be alone in this body versus that body, in this life versus that life. It's easy to dismiss that the process we call life is larger than our individual lives, plural, or, episodically speaking. Life itself is grander than that, larger than that, and operates in ways that are mind-bogglingly more sophisticated than just what's going on with me or what's going on with you. This makes it easy, because our society is so individual-oriented, so, dare I say it, ego-driven or ego-focused. This makes it easy to disassociate ourselves from the whole multi-generational process that is the human species. Why do I bring this up? What does this has to do with Weinstein or Trump or anyone else imposing sexual power or abusive behavior upon anyone else of either gender? Because let's be honest, abuse happens across all of the different sort of gender identity box lines that we've created for ourselves. For those of you who've listened for a while, you may know where I'm going. If you're just tuning in for the first time because of this particular topic, I hope this isn't too crazy sounding for you. Our society is crazy making. As I commented on originally on Facebook in response to seeing the pattern growing around me, seeing how many of my friends, acquaintances, random strangers from social media that are women and many that are men that are stepping up to that public discourse virtual microphone to say, hey, this has happened to me too, or hey, I've stood by and not spoken up in witness to something like this, or I've found myself allowing my ego to choose my actions for me and found myself imposing my sexual dominance over someone else. This has happened to so many of us in one way or another, and if not directly to us, we know someone immediately around us impacted by this form of behavior. So why bring up transcendental, multidimensional spiritual talk in regards to this? One of the things that is very quickly forgotten by us as individuals as we integrate into society is that our society is a process of indoctrination, no matter how you slice it. Whether you believe in this religion or that religion, you're part of this political party or that political party, or none of them. If you've participated in society, you've participated in the process of receiving social indoctrination. We are multi-generational information machines that carry forth these things we call culture, these abstractions we call social norms or moral codes. And the truth of the matter is that none of those things operate purely in the good, and that none of those things are free of corruption, that none of those things are free of cross-contaminated signaling and very misguided guidance. Our society as a whole is guilty of condoning, sort of fabricating consent for, perpetuating, and living in a society that does this, that perpetuates this. We've had an unhealthy, oppressive, biased, domineering, and very damaging set of norms or sexual conditioning floating around in our society on the surface, just under the surface, for generations. for much longer than most of us care to even, acknowledge. And we quite quickly dismiss past trends as the, foolishness of past generations and assume that there's no repercussions now. Well, I want to step up and contribute my voice to this whole movement and acknowledge that the sexual conditioning, these norms, these moral values that are very conflicting, often very oppressive, and not very well informed about sexual health, sexual pleasure, and sexual decency, have been insidiously opposed on us for a really, really long time. And I want to say and own up and share and allow my fellow brothers and sisters to acknowledge that this has traumatized us all. No one is free of the impacts of this sexual repression / reactionism that we've encoded in our society. None of it's new. You look back through history, and what are all the great, epic, silly stories, the dramas and the romances that we tell ourselves about? Our foolhardy attempts to, have passionate love affairs, and then all the horrible ways in which we mishandled that impulse. This is a frightening thing to own up to. I understand that. But even the most genteel, kind, respectful male or female individual, regardless of gender preference or identity, every last one of us grew up under the influence of a social set of norms that openly sexualized or sexualizes, because it's not like it stopped, sexualizes anything and everything for the purpose of commodifying it, for the purposes of profiteering. Growing up, if I'm honest, there are countless stories of being exposed at an extremely young age. And I'm not before I go any further, I want to be very clear. I'm not virtue signaling. I'm not claiming anything other than a genuine desire for our society to heal. And that part of that is owning up to an honest look at ourselves. So I want to share personal stories and stories of acquaintances and social media, quote-unquote, friends. But I'm going to anonymize it all, in part because this is such a sensitive subject. And also in part because none of us are... This is something that is bigger than this. These people are bad and these people are good. We can't let this process get painted into that corner. Just a few minutes before going on the air, I came across a meme, and well-intentioned, I'm sure, a protester holding up a sign, get outraged and destroy the patriarchy. I do not disagree with the rejection of patriarchy, but as any longtime listener knows, I can't also agree with any acts of violence as means of rectifying the problem, whatever the problem is. Acts of violence will never solve the problem. So that's my disclaimer. Growing up in this society, in this postmodern society, all right, I'm in my early 40s. So anybody younger than me, anybody older than me, while some of the details and maybe the intensity level will vary depending on which direction, the year difference is, this is all the same. We grew up under this culture of young boys talking almost exclusively with each other in a sort of language that was inherently, even at such young ages as before puberty, the kind of language we used and that was shared with us, being handed down in this cabal of manhood, was inherently chauvinist, inherently sexist, inherently pejorative and dismissive of women. And I'm sure that the kind of... And I'm not a woman, and while for most of my adult life I've had primarily female friends, I can't claim to have had as much access to female culture at younger ages. But there's one of my earliest and silliest memories from entering the school system here. Mind you, I'm a foreign-born citizen, came here perfectly legally with my papers. No reason to get mad at me for being here. And I love this country. I love all countries, but I love this country for being the place that it is and living through the struggles that it's living through. It's crazy and it's inspiring, right? But I digress. Coming here, one of my earliest memories that could fall under the bucket of like social commentary is like, isn't it interesting that boys and girls are so clearly segregated, even though this is all schools were in my day and age, quote unquote, gender integrated and racially integrated. But the moment, while we all sat together in different desks, the moment the bell rang, the boys went and hung out with the boys and the girls went and hung out with the girls. And quite frankly, from late, elementary school and as early as, the first time I had to walk into a locker room in junior high, the way in which older guys talked about this network of issues, intimacy, let's put it all together as one word, was just crazy. Now, I'm not saying that I was so enlightened at that age that I knew right away, but I was always wary and uncomfortable. And I'm not free of letting that, I'm not innocent of having let that language somehow influence me. There are, just like any honest look at what's going on right now, and the only conclusion is that if you're a woman and you've lived your entire life free of any form of sexual harassment or sexual humiliation or teasing of any kind or inappropriate commentary or inappropriate advances, then you are a really rare exception to the rule. And inversely, if you're a guy that has never cajoled a girl, made an inappropriate comment, made an inappropriate joke, thought inappropriate thoughts, let's be fair. And it's not about getting to the point of being thought police, because there's a whole anti-reactionary thing going on out there. And I got to stop rambling, because I haven't even touched on some of the testimonials I want to share. But let me kind of zoom back. Okay, so this is all difficult and challenging, and a lot of people have done horrible things to other people. And it has, quite genuinely, become so normalized that in story sharing about online dating with people that I've had conversations about potentially meeting with, one of the most sort of immediate comedy topics is horror stories about online dating. The common practice of receiving unsolicited pictures of genitalia, etc. As we move forward, one of the things I would hope humbly to bring to this discussion is the reminder for all those, as they are opening up to their perspective on this societal issue, realizing where they situate themselves as having never done it, having done it, having never received that sort of treatment, having received that sort of treatment, that while, yes, it's perfectly correct, it's perfectly right and perfectly real to feel anger, to feel fear, to feel all the negative feelings you can list, that the best way forward, not because I say so, not because anybody in particular said so, because this is just the way reality works, is to heal. And the best thing we can choose as allies, as victims, as perpetrators, is to heal. And I know that this is one of those things. People have a really hard time forgiving themselves if they're entrenched in victim mentality, and forgiving their abuser if they're caught up in anger. And that's the hardest thing. But all the wisdom in the world, whatever flavor, whatever brand, whatever variety, whatever ethnic origin you want, indicates that to truly heal, to fully transcend the transgression, we must have the strength to forgive ourselves for having fallen victim, forgive those who fell prey to behaving out or acting out those evil actions. And here's the part that's difficult. And I know that many won't want to hear this, but perpetrators are suffering too. And I know that they do the best job of hiding it, so it's easy to just hate, because their ego is in full-blown control. Therefore, they put on a huge performance of having zero negative impact and suffering zero consequences. But trust me, it is, like I said, we did not get here by accident. And we will not climb out of this trauma without a real sort of genuine compassion and a taking of responsibility on all sides by all individuals. Sex is a gift to us from the divine, folks. It's meant to be beautiful and healing and magical and all these wonderful things. But of course, like anything in reality, anything in nature, it can be abused, corrupted, and used in horrible, painful ways. But the bravery and the strength and the compassion being displayed in our society, in our social media right now, in response to this, that's the win, I guess, is where I'm going with this. Keeping it anonymous, I want to run through some lovely, heart-wrenching things that some social media friends have posted. And I'll only identify their general gender, and I mean that as a respect to them, because I didn't take the time. I'm pulling this all together today, and this, as controversial as this might be, I didn't take the time to contact them and say, hey, I might want to comment this. So I'm going to generalize their statement. One gentleman friend of mine says that after seeing all these posts with the hashtag, he's heartbroken. His eyes are open, that he will be better. He will work to help make us all better. And that if he is failing to do that, that he welcomes and asks, his friends not to hesitate to tell him how he can be a better ally. And I just wanted to celebrate that, because that's just one example of men around, the world right now stepping up and saying, hey, help us be better allies, because we're just dumb guys. And I wasn't trying to make excuse making, right? Like, it's important to own up. This has happened. Okay, why is it happening? That's the next step. Why is it happening? Because our society has had this crazy making set of quote unquote norms that it's passed down for generations now. A female friend of mine with an alternative set of identities that I don't need to get into, speaks about the sort of pain of remembering awful things that has happened to her, and brushed aside, and she asks if anyone else is experiencing that, and then goes on to say that she's grateful for the memory jog because it reminds her of how insanely comfortable I assume she means as a society, we as a society have become with assault and harassment. She does not ever want to live through that level of resignation. She remembers she's pissed and she's not putting up with it anymore. And that is true and correct, and anyone and everyone should be standing up that way. And I just want to add, again, like my contribution is to add that through that anger we can transcend. We shouldn't allow ourselves or each other fall into the ego trap of rage and self-righteousness, though, because that doesn't heal anybody. I wanted to honor a couple more people. I'm going to check how much time I've got left. Okay, I've got time. I did ramble a bit more than I expected. Another gentleman friend of mine who struggled with this phenomenon speaks about it this way. He's been reading his friends' MeToo posts and wanting to make a response. And he struggled because everything he wrote felt condescending, hypocritical, or preachy. And that's difficult, right? I mean, we all can feel that way. Then he saw another male friend of his post with the hashtag I have. And my friend writes that he tried to express that and he could not. Not because he didn't have any of those experiences, because he began to realize that he had had too many. He remembered a very specific incident from many years ago, and he boldly chose to reach out to that individual woman. He was nervous that she wouldn't remember. It had been a long time ago, and that at that time to him, it did not seem like a very big deal. I want to pause there. He goes on for quite a bit. They had a good discussion, and they both healed from it. And he goes on to encourage gentlemen. He says, so, I want to quote it directly. So, gents, if you don't know what to do to help make this right, reach out. Reach out to one woman and then maybe another. It doesn't make it better, but maybe it's a start. And there's another refrain being echoed by many men. I hear you, I believe you, and I am learning from what you have shared. I wanted to pause there about it not being a big deal. This is the hard part for us, and I want to speak to the guys in the audience, and I hope that the females don't feel excluded. I'm not trying to exclude. I'm just saying, guys, we have to unite in growth about this. And we have to really step up to the fact that our society, especially here in Trumptopia, clever tie-in to my other series. If you don't know what Trumptopia is, go check out Good Morning Trumptopia. But here in Trumptopia, and in the process of becoming Trumptopia, in the interim years while we were hashtag Murica, and so on, we were not only, let's be honest, like the white privilege talk was really hard for a lot of, especially for a lot of white men to have. And I was in a precarious position being a guy who looks very white but doesn't feel or think or identify as a quote-unquote American white person, because I come from another country and I was not raised with those kinds of values. And when white people talk, behind closed doors in non-mixed company, I radically disagree with a lot of the default positioning. Not to conflate issues, but in this moment, all men of whatever race identity, because race is just a fucking lie, all men have to own up to, and whatever sexual persuasion, because that's not a lie, but a personal choice. You like, and whatever, based on both, a mix of nature and nurture, in my opinion. To try to flatten it out to either one or the other is to be naive and be confrontational and be divisionary, right? We're all a culmination of everything. But as men, we were not only given male privilege, we were foolhardily instructed by the male culture that we grew up in to pursue women sexually with a kind of penis privilege. And we have lived hypocritically. Even the most gentlemanly of us have lived hypocritically. because we've allowed this culture to thrive. We've celebrated, we've allowed men to neglect, abuse, oppress, and disenfranchise and dehumanize our mothers and our sisters and our daughters just because it was the norm. And it's difficult and painful to own up to that. But on behalf of the larger meta-spiritual process going on, we have to confront that within ourselves, because it isn't just that little bundle or collection of bad apples. The really crazy radical thing I keep hinting at is that, and those of you who know me from my other podcasts or know me from Instagram or Facebook might be familiar with this. All the problems that we face, okay, and I'm speaking to everybody again, I'm not just excluding out to guys. I'm just saying, guys, even if you are a nice guy, even if you're a guy that doesn't get any, we have to own up to that this is what our culture has been, and that it continues and perpetuates because we allow it. And we're guys. We're the guys that benefit. We benefit from it, whether we feel like we're party to it or not. But I digress. Speaking to us all, to everyone, as a species, as a collection of people, as a community, as a family, because we're all 99.9% genetically identical. That means we're all interrelated. All the problems that we face are symptoms. They are symptomological problems. So while, and I don't say this with any disrespect for anyone's cause or anyone's individual chosen symptom, but if we only focus our attention as individuals or groups of individuals on selected symptomology and ignore other symptomology, we will not heal enough as a species to overcome the problem. In my humble, spiritual, metaphysical, transcendental, postmodern, mystic opinion, all of this, I mean, people like Donald Trump, people like Harvey Weinstein, and everything they represent, they are symptoms of this species-wide spiritual malady in which we are so disconnected from ourselves. And so it's much more common to say we're disconnected from nature, but we are nature. So what are we disconnected from? Ourselves, our whole selves, our complete selves. And we've, this malady is about allowing ego to get away with the worst possible things ego can get away with. Not to be overly simplistic, not to dismiss anybody else's well thought out logic about the symptoms and those problems and how to get at those problems. There's a lot of great symptomology-oriented solution thinking going on. But to really, truly, as a species, transcend the problem, we must heal. We must heal ourselves as individuals. We must heal each other as collections of families that build up communities that create the entire network of the species. And that includes those so damaged and corrupted and turned around inside out by ego, that they have become the perpetrators of these horrible, heinous acts. That's a big societal challenge. But I hope that as we navigate this public discourse, and I know there's a lot of other things going on in the world, right? And we'll talk about them in other episodes, as we are just about out of time. I I hope that as more and more people open up about this, whichever side of the divide they land on, that as more and more people open up about it, that there is compassion and love being broadcast. Because remember, folks, for those who don't know, if you haven't heard this in my podcast before, as much as we might think or perceive ourselves to be impossibly alone in our lives and in our bodies and locked up in our skulls, we're actually interconnected in a species-wide spiritual network. And your body avatar, is a receiver and a transmitter. So as you work through your trauma and you heal and you forgive, don't forget to broadcast that out to everybody else around you, whether they believe in that sort of thing or not. While belief against it will dampen their ability to recognize that they're receiving it, they'll still be surrounded by those uplifting, loving energies, regardless. So I dedicate this episode to all those who have suffered, to all those who have been humiliated, to all those who are being brave and bold and stepping up right now, and to all those who are guilty, to all those who are suffering the shame of having been a victim or having been a perpetrator, and to all those who are desperately, desperately wanting a solution and a healing to grow. For all of that, I dedicate and broadcast as much love as my body avatar is capable of broadcasting. And if you think I'm crazy, all right, I'll send you an extra dose. Let's lift each other up, folks, as we live through this moment. Let's lift each other up and heal each other and ourselves. Heal ourselves and each other. And let's make sure that future generations don't repeat this crazy history, in another 30, 40, 50, 60 years. Om Shani Medishanti Om Namaste. Thank you for listening. May peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart. And may you find opportunity to heal today. Go out there and be good humans, folks. As always, thanks for listening. This show is brought to you by your generous support on my Patreon page. The show is made possible by the support of my family members and friends who think I'm crazy. So thanks to them. And by those who share and comment. To those who share and comment, I also want to say a special thanks. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, or Gmail.